Sunday, June 1st, 2018. We are now on the silt-filled Missouri. We put on the water at the 10 o'clock hour at the Virgil Ferry. The air is comfortable, being 65 to 70 degrees. I just passed coal banks as I write. Jesse sits in the stern, and our canoe is lashed to the cataract on which rides JJ and my dad, John. The current is strong with recent rain runoff and still heavy snow on the mountains. The sky is a bright and gorgeous blue with an even disbursement of clouds. The Bear Paw Mountains are now in view. The banks are filled with Russian olive and cottonwood.
Push this into shore.
To bring it to 16. I kind of wish I could that. We sat in awe of the beauty. This was a bucket list trip for me. Something I had planned since I was a river guide over 18 years ago, when I'd first heard stories of this particular float, of this region, the landscape. Every bend in the river brought new excitement, new anticipation for what monuments, formations, what new unique beauty we might see and come across. And each time it was shocking, awe-inspiring. Or, in the words of Meriwether Lewis, scenes of visionary enchantment. 3 o'clock. The breeze has calmed and the murky Missouri has slowed. Limber pines have now become sentinels upon the white cliffs. White walls line the river, a truly amazing formation. We have seen several pelicans, bald eagles, and deer. Several locations show basaltic rock. Soon we will arrive at Eagle Creek. An interesting topic of conversation that we had over the course of this particular stretch of river was Horse Thief Cabin. Only partial walls of cut sandstone remain of the cabin on the hillside above Monroe Island. It was used by Jack Monroe when he was trapping wolves and stealing horses in the 1870s and 1880s.
Look at that, you got like is that a basalt vein in the middle of the sandstone right there? There's an amphitheater.
Having completed the setting up of our encampment, we set out to hike Neat Coulee. We proceeded to hike through the tight, chalk-walled canyon, meandering through the basement of geology. From the bottom to the top, after we took to the right fork, the entire locale exudes an ancient and primitive aura. While exploring through the canyon, we discussed the torrent of water that ripped through it, gouging it through the earth, and continues annually during the spring runoff or whenever there's a torrential downpour on the plains above. There was a drowned carcass of a deer laying at the bottom of the canyon. The walls became tighter and narrower the higher up we hiked.
Ledges. It's slippery, guy. Be careful.
The Eagle Creek area has a rich history. Archaeological evidence indicates American Indians used this area as a campsite for centuries. Since homesteading days, the area was also home to a herd of wild horses, captured up through the 1960s for rodeo stock, giving the area another name, Wild Horse Bottom. In 1906, the Conley Post Office was established here for area homesteaders, but it remained for only 15 months. After reaching the top of the canyon, we cut our way across what would become the ridge separating the left and right forks of the main canyon we entered. The top was littered with ancient stones set in mud, igneous basaltic slabs, white sandstone, and black iron pebbles littering the surface. Years of bizarre erosion carved patterns throughout the formation. On return to camp, I hiked the hills above the camp. The view of LaBarge Rock is exquisite from the high sage and yucca covered hills. After a brief rest, Jesse and I set out in a canoe and we crossed the swift current of the river from camp in a western direction. We entered the outlet of the coulee opposite camp and traveled 50 yards in the small, narrow channel that was filled with mosquitoes and harassing insects.
Yeah, go right down there between that pillar and then up this.
We set out and found a small notch cut into the white cliffs. Finding a good route, we climbed our way to the top of the most prominent outcrop of cliff. The view from there was amazing. Returning to the river, Jesse fished, and we then crossed the river returning to camp. Lasagna is ready. After dinner, there was apple crisp and Elijah Craig whiskey. We sat around a fire of cottonwood we had collected from some fallen dead timber and read the Lewis Journal entry from June 1st, 1805, as during that time the Corps of Discovery was traveling the very route we had covered today. The sweet smell of cottonwood smoke fills camp. The air is calm. It is 9:30. Today was a good day. July 2nd. Awoke to clear sky and warm temperatures, with a slight breeze out of the northwest. Several deer could be seen across the river browsing below the sunlit cliffs. Breakfast of coffee and eggs hit the spot. The mountain house skillet was great, after adding Tabasco. Camp was taken down and preparations made to embark.
You got to move. You got to move. You got to move, child. You got.
The large white wall you see on my left is the same formation that was painted by Carl Bodmer in the year 1833 when he came up this same section of river with Prince Maximilian of Germany. Here you see the Grand Natural Wall. This wall-like appearance is quite common along this stretch. In volcanic periods, dark molten material was forced into cracks in the sedimentary rock. Over time, the molten material solidified, and subsequent erosion of the surrounding softer rocks exposed these dark igneous walls that you see today.
But when that long is ready,
For real.
you got to move. You see that woman
Catfish.
that walked the street.
That's like a 5-pounder.
You see that policeman out on the
Don't lose
I
it.
told you there was catfish here, didn't I?
one in love. Yeah,
Eat him for dinner.
you got to move.
Look at that guy.
Right on, man.
Stopped at the Citadel before noon. Almost immediately, Jesse caught a catfish on some fresh goldeneye bait that he had cut up earlier. I climbed as high as I could to just before the difficult and more vertical terrain of this famous monument. I then hiked to the nose of the ridge that comes down to form the Citadel and look out upon the valley. Soon we will depart and continue on to the Slaughter River.
Get ready.
Here you see Citadel Rock, a National Historic Landmark. The Citadel is one of the most prominent natural features on the Upper Missouri. It is an impressive, dark, igneous rock at the river's edge, about 1/2 mile upstream from the hole-in-the-wall campground. It has been featured in some of the most famous historical paintings of the Upper Missouri, some of them by the previously mentioned painter Carl Bodmer in 1833. Before departing Citadel, Jesse decided to fish for one more catfish, which was successful. The party separated, and the other two went on down the river to catch up with us later. Jesse and I set out in the canoe alone. The winds had calmed, and we were able to observe the various monuments and features of the surroundings in a calm silence. We looked out from the canoe, halted our oars, and just took in the magnificent scenery that we found ourselves in. We looked back at the Citadel for one last time before we turned around the bend, this monument that had been painted for almost 2 centuries by artists who made the same journey as us. We came to the hole-in-the-wall, an interesting feature with a large hole in the white sandstone cliffs. We parked the canoe, journeyed through some sagebrush, found a trail, and hiked to the ridge that made up this incredible feature.
What do you think of that?
Awesome.
That's living right there. Oh man. Let's get up there.
We scrambled, climbed, and hiked our way to the top, and found a notch in the cliffs where we could climb our way all the way up to the spine itself and walk out to the tops of this hole in the wall. The view was spectacular, an amphitheater of white stone, creating an almost marble appearance. This remote and ancient landscape appears nearly untouched. Ancient igneous uplifts of what was once lava blend with the sandstone and line the spine of the ridge above the hole in the wall. This vast and lonely, empty landscape shows no signs of other humans, no signs of human intervention. There's no homes, no roads, nothing as far as the eye can see in either direction. The section of the Upper Missouri just below Hole in the Wall is one of the most scenic stretches within the National Monument. Extraordinary rock formations and towering pillars have inspired explorers, visitors, and artists for years. Certain formations have been given special names, such as Steamboat Rock, Dark Butte, and Archangel. Carl Bodmer painted the 7 sandstone columns, called the 7 Sisters. The columns represent 7 nuns in their habits, with Sister Superior leading them up the hillside. Here you see Dark Butte, with the Archangel perched below, wings stretched back.
And she went up on top. I don't know what she was playing hard to get or what, but she climbed that thing and both of them just went right up that face. Out on the prairie. That's what we do.
Chop him down, wrap him up. In a silver shroud.
Several of the turns of the river brought with them a horrendous wind, luckily at our tail, pushing us at a greater speed down the river, giving us good time. Monday, July 2nd, 2018. It's 7:45 p.m. Today was both a beautiful and arduous float. We traveled a distance of 21 river miles from Eagle Creek to Slaughter River. I had a beer and cup of noodle, and we then worked to herd about 10 to 15 cows and calves from the site. Jesse lowered some wire, and the bovine quickly left our encampment with a little bit of our assistance. I then hiked off alone the high bluffs behind the camp. I found a beautiful, smaller rendition of the hole in the wall. Below the bluffs of dark clay, it was a perfect, secluded castle of white, with one small window. In the evening, Jesse grilled elk from last year's hunt over the sweet-smelling fire of cottonwood. After dinner, the wind calmed and the sun dipped below the dark and distant clouds, casting a most glorious saturation of light and color from the tips of the sage to the most distant hills and the cliffs across the river. We sat in the shelter and talked while the wind sang in the rustling leaves of the towering cottonwoods surrounding this historic and tranquil camp. The fire is still cracking, the glow of our lantern casting a soft, gentle glow on this journal. Truly, this is a magical journey I wish all could experience. It was here that Carl Bodmer was ashore sketching for his painting Camp Grovant of the Prairies in 1833. We awoke to calm, clear sky and warm temperatures. Birds erupted in chorus with the arrival of sunlight cast upon the river bottom. Lumbering from our places of slumber, we stoked the fire, brewed coffee, and had breakfast. We cranked the music of Mississippi Fred McDowell and discussed once again the existing threats to our inalienable right to bear arms. Packing our gear, we prepare for the final stretch. It was given the name Slaughter River after Lewis and Clark expedition arrived and discovered a pile of buffalo carcasses that they passed on their way west upstream. They believed that the Indians had run the buffalo off this particular buffalo jump, creating a pile of rotting carcasses, of which the stench, they said, was almost unbearable. We put on the water at 10:30 and were dispersed as a party, with Jesse and I well ahead of John and JJ. The country is opened up, with the pines increasing upon the distant hills and ridges. The sky is increasing overcast. The air has been calm, yet at the writing now a headwind breeze has begun. Just passed through Dead Man Rapid. The hills are green, and the bluffs now a darker sediment. This morning, we have been serenaded by the calls of mourning doves and the constant song of meadowlark. Pelicans groom themselves on an island. Bald eagles are frequent, standing on the ground of small bluffs overlooking the river. The air is cool. It is 12:45. We have just passed the Judith River, alluvial formation, thick with cottonwood. Our journey has concluded.